So I actually want to do this. I just realized that I have the ability to share my screen. So I'm going to share. Can I do that? Oh, yes. I love it when a good plan comes together. So we, at our congregation some years back, we just started talking about the fact that God still does signs, wonders, and powers, or miracles, if you like that term. And what I realize is that God is uninterested. He's generally uninterested in doing miracles for people who don't believe in it. He's generally uninterested in doing miracles for people whose primary expression of faith is just a set of doctrines to which they assent. God does miracles, signs, wonders, and powers for people who are out playing the game. So, it's the people who are on the field playing the game who get to see the signs, wonders, and powers, the amazing things. The guys up in the stands who are just sitting there watching, God's not all that interested in them. So once we kind of started going down this road of asking God do something really big for us in our congregation, all of a sudden we started to see miracles, actually a lot of them. And we got a little bit of a reputation. I'm not trying to make a big statement here, but a little bit of reputation. And we've had people call us up from other places and ask us, will we pray for them? And, will we intercede for them? And it's not uncommon for us to do that. And then here's some really cool stories. So about a year and a half or so ago, we got a call from a church down in Atlanta, and there was a family there. So a mother and a father, they're both medical doctors. So these are MDs who understand illnesses. And they had asked someone who knew me, would we get North Boulevard to pray for their son? Their son has neuroblastoma, which is a really serious form of cancer that affects not that many, but children every year. I don't know what the rate is, maybe 1,000 a year in the US, something like that. And it can be fatal. It's again, it's a very serious disease. So this guy calls me up and says, hey, these folks have asked that that y'all will pray for this young man. His name is Edward. And I said, yeah, look, not only will we pray, but my elders and I, this was before the pandemic, we'll get in the car, we'll go to Atlanta. It's about 4 hours away. We'll go down and lay hands on him, and we'll pray that God will heal him. And they said, you don't have to do that. Just pray where you are. So we did. We spent several weeks praying over this little guy, Edward, that none of us had ever met. And I'll be honest with you, I kind of forgot about it after those several weeks. And then I guess it was about, I don't remember if it was 4 or 5 months later, I got an email from my friend who said, hey, this family has asked if we would, the Page family, that's the name of Edward Page, they've asked if I would tell you thank you for the fact that their son has been healed of neuroblastoma. And honestly, at first I was like, oh, who is that? I couldn't even remember it enough months ago. And I said, yeah, don't you remember y'all prayed for him? Well, he's been healed of his cancer. Now, in case you're thinking to yourself, oh, they're just a bunch of fake healers, nobody, both his parents are medical doctors. They understand this. So I said, that's awesome. I said, I'd like to share that with the church. They said, even better, we got something for you. So they sent me a little video clip of little Edward saying thank you. I'm going to play you the video clip. It's only 20 seconds long. So I'm assuming you can see my screen. And if so, listen to little Edward say thank you to us. Oh, wait, hang on. That's the wrong one. Let's do the first one here. This is, yeah, here we go. This is Edward saying thank you.
Hi, Mr. Young. My name is Edward, and I'm having a scan in January. But I'm doing great now.
My scans look good.
My scans look good. Woo! Woo!
Okay, so Edward, his parents sent me that to say, hey, little Edward he's showing no signs of the disease and he's going to get a scan. Okay, so not long ago I got a second one from Edward. I'm going to play this, and this was maybe 2 months ago I got this one. It's another short one.
Would you like to see my drill, or would you like to hear about my scans? My scans were great.
Your scans were great? Thanks, everybody. Can hear you.
Thanks, everybody.
I'm going to stop there. So this is Edward telling us his scans are great. He does not have the cancer. It's gone. And again, I just can't say enough. It's just God responds. He responds to people who asking. Now, by the way, I want to make sure you know, God doesn't always say yes. And I've prayed for a lot of folks to be healed and they died. Sometimes God's answer is, no, I'm not going to do it this way. I'm going to do it this way. But God never says, I'm not listening. There's no such thing as unanswered prayer. It's just the answer may not be what we're expecting. I bring that up because in Jesus's final command, the final command of the Gospel of Matthew, which should be our first priority, he says this. He says, all authority in heaven and on earth, from Matthew 28, 18, 19, and 20. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And then this is his last imperative. It's a little hard to see in English. I'll translate it from Greek with the word there. Behold, I am with you always, even to the end of the ages. It's the behold part that I want to focus on. Some English translations don't even translate the word behold, but it's there. Jesus is teaching us that he's going to be with us when we carry out his mission. And I want to say he's everywhere anyway. He's going to be everywhere anyway, whether you obey him or not, he's everywhere. But he means I'm with you in a very special sense at the end of this final command. What he wants you to know is, if you will carry out my mission, going and making disciples of all nations, in a very special way, I'm going to be with you. And I want you to see me. So what I want to do is I want to suggest, as we kind of bring this to a conclusion, that when we acknowledge Jesus as king, when we obey Jesus as king, when we're looking for it, we're going to start seeing Jesus do all kinds of crazy things. See, a lot of us grew up with this stunted view of miracles that says that God only did miracles in the first century. He stopped doing miracles. Now he doesn't do any miracles. We're just on our own. And I just want to say, first of all, that is so unbiblical. But not only is it unbiblical, but it just leaves us with what Paul calls. So Paul uses this term in 2 Timothy. He says there are some people who have the form of godliness, but they don't have its power. God doesn't just want you to have the right doctrines, to go to the right church, to understand the right plan of salvation, or the right 5 acts of worship, or whatever your little thing is. He wants you to have the power to follow him. God is a God of power. God does all kinds of amazing things in order to accomplish his will. Our problem has been this. So give me just a second to talk about the problem, why this has been a problem for us. First of all, miracles have been abused. The idea of miracles have been abused. So in the Roman Catholic Church in the medieval times, when they looked at a pancake, they saw the face of Jesus in it, and so they didn't want to eat the pancake. Or, every little thing that happened became almost like a superstition. And so a lot of Reformed churches, so that's going to be pretty much everybody that's Protestant, including Churches of Christ, since the 16th century. What we said was, look, all that superstition, that can't be right. So it's like we swung the pendulum so far to the other direction that we're not even sure God does anything anymore. So when we pray, it's like, Lord, bless the hands of the doctor that's healing the guy who's got the sick pancreas. Just think of how contorted that prayer is. You got a guy laying there with a sick, diseased pancreas. You don't ask God to bless the pancreas. You ask God to bless the hands of the doctor. The hands are perfectly fine on the doctor. His hands aren't the ones that need the blessing. It's the pancreas that needs the blessing. But it's like we're too afraid to ask God to heal the pancreas. So we use all these circumlocutions to talk around it. And I think it's because we don't want to have to blame God if the pancreas doesn't get healed. So we don't ask him to heal the pancreas. We ask God to work on the perfectly good hands of the doctor. Well, listen, if God can bless the hands of the doctor, he can bless the pancreas of the patient. He can do both. My point is, we've just kind of earned this or inherited this stunted view that God doesn't really do things like that. It was solidified in the West, in the English-speaking world especially, by none other than David Hume, who was a Scottish philosopher. He was an English philosopher in Scotland. Hume died, by the way, in 1776, the same year that the U.S. signed its Declaration of Independence from the U.K. It's the year that we decided we're not going to be part of you anymore. Those of you in Canada. So, sorry if that was tacky. It was kind of like a joke. I hope you're all laughing, and it's a really happy thing. But that's the year Hume died. And here Hume was an atheist. He didn't believe in God. And Hume he kept talking to Christians, and Christians would say this. They would say, well, you got to believe in God because of the miracles. The miracles are evidence of God. And Hume sat down and he said, well, what is a miracle? He said, a miracle is anytime something happens that's contrary to the law of nature. And then he started analyzing all these claims to miracles that Christians were making. And he said, see, I can prove that not a single one of those violated the laws of nature. Therefore, he says, there is no miracle, so now I know there is no God. Well, here's what the church did that was so devastating. We said, okay, Hume, we'll accept your definition of miracles, that a miracle is something that violates the law of nature, and we'll just try harder to prove it. We should have never accepted his definition of miracles. Why are we letting an atheist tell us what a miracle is? Now, what does he know about miracles? In the Bible, we don't get the word miracle as a violation of the laws of nature. By the way, in the New Testament, they didn't even think about laws of nature. That's a modern invention, that concept of the law of nature. The Bible speaks not about miracles as violations of laws of nature, but instead the Bible speaks about three things: signs, wonders, and powers. Signs, wonders, and powers. And in the Bible, God always did signs, wonders, and powers, and he always will. And he's still doing signs, wonders, and powers. Let me illustrate it for you. You go out, I assume that you look out over the Lake Ontario or whatever lake it is, Niagara or whatever. Niagara, I've been to Niagara. And what do you see at Niagara? You see a rainbow as the water comes off. And surely over the lake, you've seen rainbows out there. So what is a rainbow? The rainbow is a sign from God. Genesis chapter 9 calls it a sign from God. So what is it? It's a reminder that God's never going to destroy the world by floods again. It's a sign from God. Now, it's a very natural thing. It can be explained naturally. It's a matter of physics. It's still a sign from God. It's not contrary to nature, but it's still a sign from God. It's not against the laws of nature. It's very consistent with the laws of nature, but God still uses it as a sign. So when the Bible speaks of sign, wonders, and powers, one kind of sign is just God using whatever God wants to signify something from else. The word something to us, the word signify has the word sign inside of it. So we should be looking for God to give us signs all over the place. They don't have to be contrary to the laws of nature, Hume's definition. When I was talking about with my friend Shadanke, they're in a room, the door's locked, they're praying and fasting. God, show us where to plant a church. Some guy knocks on the door. He says, hey, I live in a village up north. Will you send somebody up to plant a church? That's a sign from God. Did it violate the laws of nature? I don't guess so. Maybe it did. I don't care if it did. God used it as a sign. So that's a sign. A wonder. A wonder is anything that just makes you wonder. It's like so amazing that you're like, whoa, it's something that makes you marvel, if you will. It's just something that's like amazing. So we read in the Bible, I wrote down several of these. I want to make sure I get them. Psalm 17 and verse 7. We read that the love of God is a source of wonder. So when the Bible says signs, wonders, and powers, whenever you really feel or you have that connection to God's love, that's a wonder. When you see a baby born, like I was there for both my babies being born, that's a wonder. I'm telling you, it's a big wonder. When you see, that God will suddenly bring you something you never thought you were going to get, that's a wonder. So like when we see all the baptisms we've seen, almost every time it's just a wonder to us. That's the Bible language: sign, wonder, and power. And the word power in the Bible simply means whenever God does something extraordinarily big. It's a really powerful thing that he did. And so a power can be what God might do in a tornado. It might be God showing some very strong encouragement for you. It can be something even what we would call extraordinary, like walking across the water, raising the dead. And by the way, I want you to know, I believe God still does all of that. And I'll tell you, I got a lot of reasons for believing it. One of them is because the Bible never says he's going to stop. We often say 1 Corinthians 13 says that these things are going to stop. That's not what 1 Corinthians 13 says. Go back and read it. What it says is that tongues and prophecies will cease. But even then, it's not real clear when Paul expects them to cease. But he doesn't say God's going to quit doing signs, wonders, and powers. He says tongues and prophecy are temporary. But signs, wonders, and powers are permanent. Go look at the book of Revelation. In the book of Revelation, which predicts the end of time, signs, wonders, and powers are still happening in Revelation. They happen right up until Jesus returns. They don't stop happening. But the second reason I believe them is because now I experience them like all the time. Actually, sometimes it's almost boring to experience so many awesome things that God does. I shouldn't say it that way, but it's like you get used to it. You just get used to it after a while. I did a mission trip in India one time, and I spent a day at a lepers colony there, which is one of the most humbling days I've ever had in my life. And as we're there, like they brought this guy up and they said, this guy right here, we raised him from the dead a couple of weeks ago. It's like, whoa, wait, what? And okay, you can tell me it didn't happen. You can bring me all your scientists in and so forth and all. But when you're standing there talking to a guy who says, yeah, I was dead, it's dead for several hours. They prayed over him. And all of a sudden, when you start letting yourself believe that God is capable of doing that, next thing you know, you're going to start hearing those stories everywhere. You're going to start realizing, whoa, God has never stopped doing these things. So at our congregation, we expect signs, wonders, and powers, and we get them. I mean, it's pretty common now to get them. So in the book, I told a few stories that are kind of fun stories. I just want to share a few of them. So we got a young man, his name is Adam. I have his permission to share the story. He's 18 now, but when he was, I guess 17 or 16, so it was a year, probably 2 years ago, because I made it in the book. So, and the book came out last year, so maybe 2 years ago. So this guy is so my wife has kind of helped coach with homeschoolers here in our area, and he's been homeschooled, so she has them a couple hours a week, and they've just been praying a lot. Julie's on the board of a children's home in Africa, and it's in a very, very poor part of East Africa. And in this particular place, they have to provide formula for mothers who cannot produce milk because they're so malnourished. The mothers are so malnourished they can't produce milk for their babies, and the babies are dying. And so the directors of this children's home contacted Julie, my wife, and said, we got babies dying here. We can't be okay with this. So Julie and Adam get together and they start praying, Lord. So they asked, what do you need? So, by the way, formula there costs the same as it costs here. So it's like $3 a can, but they only make $1 a day there. So they can't afford it. So they said, we need $50,000 worth of formula, and it'll save the babies in this community. So, you know, Julie doesn't have $50,000, and Adam certainly doesn't have $50,000. So they said, the two of them sat down and said, we're going to pray. We're going to pray and fast that God will give us $50,000. And Adam says, I'll put the first 20 in. So here's a young 17-year-old guy, puts $20 in, 16, 17. They start praying and fasting. Then they called in a group of people and sat down with a group of people and said, will you pray and fast that God will give us $50,000 to save the lives of these babies? Now, let me just stop for a second. You see, we've been taught that it's a miracle. It's only a miracle if 2 + 3 = 6, and that would be a miracle. But what if it's a miracle when 2 + 3 = 5, but you didn't have a 2 or a 3 to start with? If God supplied you with the 2 or the 3, and then you got your 5, that's just as much a sign or a wonder or power. That's a miracle too. When you didn't even have the 2 or 3, God gave you the 2 or the 3 and equal 5. So Julie and this group got together and they started praying. Prayed, that's all they did. Adam goes to the youth minister and he says to the youth minister, hey, can I make an announcement? We're praying for $50,000. He didn't ask for the money. He said, we're praying. Would y'all pray too? Well, the youth minister said, yeah. And the youth minister said, look, I'll put 500 in myself. Well, unbeknownst to them, 2 other families, when they heard it, said, hey, we're good for $500. Then there was a business person there who said, hey, whatever you get tonight, I'll match it. Then there was a young student who went to her school and she decided to do a flea market type thing. And she brought in, I don't know, like $2,000. Next thing you know, they got $11,000. They still haven't asked for a penny yet. They've just been praying and fasting. Well, someone else found out in the community and said, hey, we'll be happy to make sure you make up the rest. Before it's over with, my wife and Adam delivered a check for $110,000 to this children's home for formula and for the care of these children. Now, let me ask you a question. If you are a young mother in East Africa, you can't make milk and your baby's dying in your arms, and you pray, dear God, give me some formula, please. You tell me that $50,000 worth of formula dropping in your lap from some little 17-year-old praying and fasting with a $20 bill in his hand is not a miracle. That's a miracle. God does these sorts of things. So Jesus says, behold, I'm with you. Jesus is he's going to pave the way for us. I had surgery on my knee 2 years ago. I showed up at the waiting room, and we have a deacon who visits people who are in the hospital. That's part of his job. In fact, he's on staff part-time to do that. He comes to meet me. It's not even 7 o'clock. He's sitting there and I said, his name's Tim. I said, Tim, how's it going? He said, oh, it's going great. He said, hey, the other day we were praying. We got a guy on hospice. He's about a week from death. He said, we prayed over him. We anointed him with oil. And he said, they took him off hospice. He said, now, how many times do you hear somebody taking him off hospice? The guy's a World War II vet. He's in his 90s. He came off hospice. He's doing great. Then Tim says, I also went by, we prayed over a little baby that has spina bifida. Excuse me. That's what happens when your brain turns 60. Had a serious disease, was in ICU. It's meningitis, excuse me, wouldn't come to me. He said, we prayed over the baby. We gathered around. We prayed together. He said, they took the baby off and sent the baby home. And he ends up he told me 2 other stories. We got a guy on cancer who's been declared clean of cancer. And he said, we had a woman who had an issue of blood. She had a hematoma. And he said, all of them been healed. And I sat there and I thought, man, 4 miracles before breakfast. That's not bad. That's a pretty good way to start the day. My point is, when you start walking this walk with God, Jesus provides for us. He says, behold, I am with you. I'm going to be with you. We don't have to do it in our own strength. Like once we take the steps of faith, God starts to provide. When we announced we're going to plant 60,000 churches, we knew nothing about planting churches. We didn't know anything about it. So, but we said we're in, people gave money for it. We started dabbling in it. Next thing we know, all these people who were interested in church planting, they started contacting us. One of the coolest things that ever happened, Jerry Trousdale, who is one of the architects of the disciple-making movement, his organization has planted more than 60,000 churches. Jerry heard about our vision in the newspaper. And he wasn't a member of our church. He wasn't even a member of the Church of Christ. He just heard about our vision and he started visiting us. And as he visited us, he fell in love with us. And he ended up leaving his church and coming to the Church of Christ, to our church. And he was come to me and say, hey, I just want you to know, it might not be as hard as you think to plant all those churches. And I'm thinking, yeah, we said 60,000. We've only done 1 so far. We only have 59,999 still to go. But all of a sudden, he started introducing us to the world of the global South and these disciple-making movements. God brought Jerry in response to our prayers, dear Lord, help us plant 60,000 churches. And since Jerry has come, we've planted 150 churches in 2 years. I'm just saying, God provided. Jesus says, behold, I'm going to be with you. When you get on his mission, he's going to open the door. He'll part the sea wherever you are. So I got to tell you another story because this is a cool one. So when we started talking disciple making, there's a Baptist guy who is, he's a basketball coach in a town not too far from where I am, a couple of cities over. And he found out about what we were doing and just contacted us and said, man, I've been making disciples too. And we've just kind of formed a great friendship. He's a really cool guy. Steve Patterson's his name. So Steve disciples on college campuses. And he's building a team of disciples who then go out and they're making disciples. And I've met some of their guys. I like they're sold out for Jesus. Well, they decided that they needed to establish a discipleship school in the country of Nepal. Like, wow, that's the most random thing. They decided they're going to do this. And they were meeting with me for coffee a couple of years ago and telling me about it. And I said, so what? How's it going? They said, well, we need $18,000 to finish it. We're college kids and we don't have 18,000, so we're just praying. And I said, I'll tell you what you do. Come to my church this Sunday and let's see if God gives you a miracle. Now, I'm not making any of this up. So about 5 of them showed up at my church in the middle of my sermon. I don't even know what I was preaching about. I had them all stand up and I said, hey, these guys are building a discipleship house in Nepal to start a disciple-making movement. They're $18,000 short, but I welcome them here. I didn't ask for a penny. By the time service was over with, I had $8,000 in my hand. By Tuesday, we had $18,000. But here's the cool thing. That happened to be Student Sunday. So our university students were coming back. We're located next to MTSU, a big university. And we were serving lunch that afternoon for all the university students. So I invite these guys, let's go back and have lunch with these university students. Maybe you'll meet somebody. We go back, we randomly, all this is random. There's 200 kids back there eating lunch, university students. We randomly sat down at a table. There were 3 guys sitting there. I assume they're students. I introduced myself. I've never seen them before in my life. They'd never been in North Boulevard in their lives. Never. They just heard we had Student Sunday. We're offering American lunch, so they came. We sat down, introduced ourselves, and they said, they gave us their names. 2 of them are medical doctors, and 1 of them is an engineer. You'll never guess what country they were from. All 3 of them were visiting that day from Nepal. You can't make that stuff up. I'm not exaggerating. That literally happened. It's as though God's like, okay, you take a step in faith I'll open the door for you. That's what Jesus says. Behold, he says, I am with you always. I want to encourage you guys. If you're thinking I can do this in my own power, you're going to get discouraged. You can't do it in your power. And I think that's one thing that holds us all back is that what if faith means stepping out of the boat and just trying it? What if faith means I'm okay if I fail occasionally because God will take care of it? What if faith means I'm going to start walking and God will make the road as I walk? We make the road by walking. You don't have to study it to death and then do it. Just start doing it. Obedience is the best teacher. Start doing it. And so when we say, disciple making is the main thing, man, you can take years and years of coursework on it, or you can just start doing it. God will make the road as you walk. God will part the ways. Jesus said his last words, go make disciples, baptize them, teach them to obey, and behold me. I'm with you. We're doing this in the power of God, not in our own power. So I got to end with one more story about my son. Jonathan was born with a birth defect. My son, Jonathan, who's 25 now. He had metopic craniosynostosis is what they call it. So all the bones in his skull were fused together. Some years ago, it would have killed him. His brain is unable to develop. But now neurosurgeons and plastic surgeons can team together, and what they do, they literally cut the skull into pieces. They spread them out and put little posts in between the pieces to hold them together. When John was 6 months old, he was scheduled for that neurosurgery, which is it's a risky surgery. And first of all, not all children survive the surgery, but second, it's possible he has permanent brain damage already because the brain has been pinched. The night before John went into surgery, our elders came over. I'll never forget it. They lathered his head up with oil and they prayed, God bless, God heal this child. And my wife and Julie's she's a prayer warrior. She's real specific about her prayers. And she had come up with this prayer. This was the prayer that we prayed. Lord, heal our son so thoroughly that he has the mental capacity one day to say a prayer in church. I don't know why she picked that, but that was what she picked. That was her prayer. We want to hear our son say a prayer in church, lead a prayer in church, because that would mean his brain was okay and that he survived. Well, John went through the surgery and it was, he doesn't remember, he's 6 months old, but we've never forgotten it. It was a really painful moment for us. And the years went by. And again, the pain didn't leave, but a lot of it we forgot. I didn't even remember the prayer for a while. I baptized Jonathan in 2004. And coincidentally, about 2 weeks after I baptized Jonathan, I was speaking at the Pepperdine lectureship. And at that point, it was a pretty big lectureship. So maybe 4,000 or 5,000 people that I was doing a keynote address to. Going to California, I thought it'd be fun to take John. We'd go down to Legoland and San Diego, and also I took Jonathan with me. I just baptized him. We got here at the Pepperdine lectureship, and just before I get to speak, the director says, "Hey, you need to call on whoever's going to say the prayer." And I didn't know I was supposed to do that. I didn't know nobody there. So I said, "Well, look, I just baptized my son. Why don't you let him say the prayer?" And he said, "Yeah, it's fine with me." So I said, "Jonathan, you got to say the prayer when I finish this speech." So I get up to preach. By the way, they have jumbotrons behind me. There's a huge crowd, like I said, probably 5,000 people. And the jumbotrons were distracting me. It's a terrible sermon. It was like one of my worst sermons, which is bad because there's a huge crowd and I did a terrible sermon. I finished the sermon. I go to sit down. The director calls Jonathan up, and John stands up there, and I see my son on the jumbotron. And I remembered the prayer we had prayed 8 years before. Lord, heal our son so thoroughly that one day he says a prayer in church. Listen to this. The first prayer my son ever prayed in church was not in a church of 20 people or 80 people. My son's first prayer was in a lectureship in front of 5,000 people. That's who King Jesus is. That's what it looks like to say, behold, I'm going to be with you always, even to the end of the world. And that is something to behold. That's something awesome. That's a sign and a wonder and a power. That's King Jesus. That's the king you want to follow.